Welcome to episode 226 of Build Your House Yourself University by BYHYU. I'm your host and fellow student, Michelle Nelson, and together we'll learn the basics of home design and construction and demystify the building process so we can become informed consumers and build quality dream homes with or without a general contractor. So I recently selected the plumbing fixtures for my project, and surprisingly, one of my toughest decisions to make was regarding which toilets to get. I never knew there was so much to consider when choosing toilets. Should you get a one-piece or a two-piece model? Where should you position the flush handle? Is a single or dual flush toilet better? Comfort height or standard height? Floor mount or wall mount? And whether you should pay extra for easy clean options. And finally, what color and style are best for your decor? I've learned that for toilets, the most expensive is not always the best option. Granted, you'd probably regret buying the cheapest toilet you can find because it's likely to have a short life full of problems. But you shouldn't assume that the more money you spend, the better the toilet will be. In the next couple of lessons, I'll discuss what I've learned regarding toilet selections. I'll also tell you about a website that tests and ranks the flushing performance of most toilets on the market. The results of this type of testing are particularly important in light of the fact that newer toilets are required by the U.S. government to use less water than was used by older models. And on that website, you'll see that some less expensive models work as well or better than some more expensive toilets. Before we move on, a shout out goes to DB2222. Thank you for our latest Apple Podcasts 5-star rating and review. They say that the podcast is, quote, a big-time confidence builder, end quote. I'm so glad you think so. I appreciate your kind words, and I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with potential listeners. Okay, let's get into the content. Your plumbing selections come way earlier than you might expect. We're still framing, but I needed to make my selections now, weeks before the plumbing rough-in. The plumbing, electrical, and mechanical, or HVAC, rough-in stage is the next major step after framing. It's at the plumbing rough-in when pipes are connected and routed through wall cavities, when shower valves are installed, and when drain lines and water supply lines are connected to the main water supply or the septic or sewer system. Plumbers won't put in fixtures like toilets or sinks in place during the rough-in. That happens during the finish plumbing phase. But during the rough-in, plumbers put in a lot of the stuff that's hidden behind walls. So my advice is, as soon as you start framing, and preferably way before that, start making your plumbing selections, even if it's just a list for yourself. That way you aren't rushed once the builder or plumber asks you for your final list of fixtures. Go to plumbing showrooms or warehouses and get into tubs, handle faucets, and sit on toilets. And don't be shy about that. You'll be living with these things for a long time, and you want them to not only look pretty, but be functional and comfortable. Like I alluded to, not all toilets are created equal. So let's discuss some of the options you'll have to decide on when making your selections. To make the selection process easier for myself, I chose the same toilet for most of the bathrooms in the house, but we're getting a little bit fancier with the toilet we're choosing for the master bath. Choose the same toilet for as many of your bathrooms as you can to make your selection process easier. Let's begin our discussion with something I never thought I'd have to even think about, but did. Flush handle placement. Some toilets come with a standard flush handle location, in which case you get what you get. But many manufacturers will have you choose a flush handle location. You'll have to decide whether you want the flush handle on the right or left of the tank or on top of the tank. When I learned I'd have to make that decision, I thought, who cares where the handle is? What difference does it make? But this is what I learned. The default handle position on most toilets is on the top left corner on the front of the tank. Here's why. Up until the 1940s, most toilets flushed by pulling a chain above the tank. The chain was located on the left side, So the person sitting on the toilet, who was typically right-handed, could pull the flush chain while seated on the toilet. That convention stuck, and even today, most manufacturers use a left-sided handle as the default, with an option to switch the handle to the right if you prefer. So, if you're right-handed and typically flush the toilet while sitting on it, then the left-sided placement of the handle is ideal for you too. Before I read the historical reason for the left-sided handle placement, my germaphobe brain came up with another reason. A left-sided handle is better, I decided, because most people are right-handed and wipe with that dominant right hand. I thought the left-sided handle is better and more sanitary because after you get up, turn around and face the toilet to flush, you can use your cleaner, non-wiping, non-dominant left hand to easily reach a left-sided handle. That's the germaphobe in me. It made sense, but it's not the real reason that the handles are typically on the left. Anyway, either way you go is fine. It's mostly a decision of personal preference. And what about the push buttons on top of the tank for flushing? Well, flush buttons on the top of the tank are usually present on dual flush toilets. So let's talk about them next. Dual flush toilets have a full flush option for solid waste and a partial flush option for urine. The push button flusher usually has one side that's larger than the other. You push the larger button if you want to use a larger flush, and the smaller button for a smaller flush. Some systems use equal-sized buttons with embossed images on them, like 1 water drop versus 2 water drops, identifying which flush is larger. Dual flush toilets can take some getting used to. If you're new to them, then the first several weeks that you use them, you may have to consciously think about which button to push when you need to flush. And you'll probably have to give your friends and visitors instructions as they head off to the bathroom. That can be a hassle, but if water conservation and saving on your water bill are important to you, a dual flush toilet may be worth the extra effort. Bear in mind, though, that dual flush toilets can be more expensive than standard flush toilets, and the reduced water flow means they tend to get soiled faster and require more frequent cleaning. Another con is that flush buttons located on the top of the tank can sometimes require greater force to press than traditional lever handles do. That can be challenging for the disabled and elderly. And according to Wikipedia, dual flush toilets develop leaks more often than standard toilets. As with everything, weigh the pros and cons and make your decision about a dual flush versus a single flush toilet based on your priorities and goals. Now, on the subject of flushing, I want to tell you about that website that I learned about that independently tests and ranks the flushing performance of the majority of toilet brands and models on the market. The website is map-testing.com. The MA in MAP stands for maximum, and the P stands for performance. The developers of map.testing.com do independent, unbiased testing of toilets and publish their results so consumers can compare models and base their buying decisions on flush performance. This type of testing is especially important since the U.S. government mandated that any toilet sold in the U.S. after 1994 can have a flush volume of no greater than 1.6 gallons. That's also 6.0 liters. They did that to reduce water demands, and that's a good thing, but the lesser amount of water can make flushing less effective, leaving toilets more soiled after each use. Many of the latest, most efficient toilets on the market have decreased their water utilization to less than that mandated by the government. In fact, most toilets that I looked at use only 1.28 gallons per flush. That small amount of water used for flushing makes knowing the results of a toilet's flushing performance testing even more essential. By the way, my plumber, who is less concerned about water conservation, says that he puts 1.6 gallon per flush toilets and houses whenever he can because they have fewer complaints about those 1.6 gallon per flush toilets. But 1.6 gallon per flush toilets are getting harder to find. So reviewing the scores of 1.28 gallon per flush toilets at the MAP testing website is very helpful. MAP-testing.com recommends buying toilets with flush scores of greater than 350. Toilets with scores of 600 or greater are highly recommended. I strongly suggest looking at this site before deciding on a toilet, since many of the bad reviews that I've read about toilets have complained about incomplete flushing. I'll have a link to map-testing.com in the show notes. Okay, moving on to a few more features. Toilet seats. Some toilet seats are sold separately from the toilet tanks, so you can choose what type of seat you prefer. We talked about bidet seats in episode 39, so we won't cover that again. I will caution you, though, that bidet seats have a smaller opening than most standard toilet seats. That smaller opening may take a little getting used to, but I've heard that once you become accustomed to a bidet seat, you'll never want to live without it. Another caution about bidet seats is that you may not be able to readily read or press the side panel controls that are attached to mini bidet seats. For mini models, you have to press the button on the side panel to activate the bidet. The control panel is often attached to the rear of the seat, and thicker thighs and a generous booty may obstruct the panel. So your thighs and booty could hinder your ability to easily see and press the controls. Plus, you have to twist your torso around and look down to see the panel. And I'd be afraid that I'd soil the seat if I had to twist too much. Even the skinny saleswoman I talked to said that she had some trouble seeing and accessing the control panel attached to the seat. So the solution to that for me is if you want a bidet seat and you have a thicker booty or thighs, you may want to opt for a remote control or wall-attached control panel that eliminates your need to use the seat-attached control panel. I learned something else that is different than the information I've told you before. My builder mistakenly told me that you have to add a hot water supply to a toilet that you want a bidet seat added to. And that's so that you could have a warm water spray. But that's not always true. Many bidet seats, I've learned, especially the higher quality ones, have a heater integrated into them that's able to heat the water from a cold water supply. If that's the case, you won't need the hot water supply line connected to the toilet. Check the specific bidet seat model or bidet toilet that you're considering before going through the extra expense of adding a hot water line for your bidet toilet. Okay, enough about bidet seats. Next, we'll talk about elongated versus rounded seats. Elongated oval toilet seats tend to be more comfortable than traditional rounded seats. But elongated seats take up more space, so they may not fit well in small spaces. Elongated toilet seats are also a little bit more expensive, but they're easier to clean and use and look more contemporary and up-to-date than more traditional round toilet seats. If you have shorter legs or you're building or remodeling a historical style house, a round seat might be a better choice. And a quick word about curved or contoured toilet seats that curve upward slightly to supposedly fit your bottom better. That feature was completely uncomfortable for both my husband and me. We found that we and our bums preferred regular old flat uncontoured seats. So again, don't be shy about sitting on toilets or toilet seats before you buy them, because what's comfortable for others may not be comfortable for you. Well, that's it for this week. Week after next, we'll finish this lesson about things that you should consider when selecting a toilet. We'll talk about one-piece versus two-piece toilets, toilet height, floor mount versus wall mount toilets, and some options that you can look for that will help you keep your toilets cleaner for longer. Make sure you subscribe to the show so that part 2 and all new episodes go directly to your podcast library as soon as the shows are released. That way you won't have to keep checking back to see when new content is published. Thanks for listening. I hope you learned as much as I did. And I hope you'll join me again next time for the next episode of Build Your House Yourself University by BYHYU. Please remember that the purpose of this podcast is simply to educate and inform. It's not a substitute for professional advice. The information that you hear is based only on the opinions, research, and experiences of my guests and myself. That information might be incomplete, it's subject to change, and it may not apply to your project. In addition, building codes and requirements vary from region to region, so always consult a professional about specific recommendations for your home.